Good day, ladies. How do empires begin? A328. How do empires begin? If we look on the module, Unit 8, page 244, military-fiscal power of the Ottoman and Mughal empires. The military labour market comprised two intersecting groups. The first group had no vested land interest in India and comprised mainly nomadic migrants from Central Asia, Iran and Afghanistan. These mobile and experienced warbands were available to the highest bidder. Given the Mughal objective of maintaining a settled land empire, it was vitally important to recruit and co-opt the chiefs of these warbands into the Mughal army. Despite such attempts at co-option, these mercenary captains remained a fixture in the Indian military labour market until the consolidation of British Empire rule in the early 19th century. The second group comprised Indian gentry, the zamindars with their retainers, including lightly armed cavalry, armed peasants and auxiliary personnel, including bearers, servants, cooks, general labourers and grooms. Both groups were dispersed among the Mansabdars during military campaigns. According to the deliberations of Mughal military commanders, the key building blocks of the military labour market were, therefore, the warlord along with the zamindar's household, which include military retainers, extended family and auxiliary personnel. A vital part of this household was its patronage network of relatives and friends. From those close by to those spread across the region, for example, a Central Asian warlord could draw on a network of men that stretched across a very wide expanse of Central and South Asia. To fight the Mughal military campaigns. Other example of military potential of Mughal-controlled India was provided in 1595 Mughal Chronicle, A.N.I. Akbari, which gives a number of Zamindari retainers for each district. What's your reaction to the number of personnel that you were deployed? To what extent do you think that the Mughal ability to raise these numbers was important in their military success? Section 3.1 showed that the Mughals could deploy tens of thousands of men in the field during military campaigns, indicative of this deep pool of labour. Mughal military power depended on sophisticated organisational structure, but it needed the men to fill the ranks. A combination of historical, geographical and economic factors created a vast supply of manpower for the South and Central Asian military labour market in the early modern period. As with the Ottoman Devshirme system, this labour could be bought rather than coerced, given the monetisation of South Asia's economy. Most retainers were paid in cash, and they also enjoyed some share of the loot taken during the course of military campaigns. In the early modern period, demography was a crucial, important factor of how empires worked. In this section, we'll examine two examples of Mughal fighting to understand how the Mughals deployed military power against their enemies. The first example is the 1567-1568 siege of Chitor in Rajasthan, Western India. The second is the Battle of Rajmahal. The Siege of Chitor, 1567 and 1568. Why Chitor? Akbar wanted to subdue the powerful Rajput kingdoms on the western flank of his empire and to gain access to seaports that controlled parts of the Indian Ocean trade. What was the trigger for the conflict? Several Rajput rulers submitted to the Mughals, but the Rana of Mughal did not. What happened? Varna filled his main fort of Chittor, leaving its inhabitants and troops to face the Mughal army because of the fort's structure and position. Akbar ordered thousands of builders and sappers to construct approach trenches to the wall. Mughal artillery opened fire and troops laid mines underneath the walls. A siege cannon was used to breach the walls. Mughal forces stormed into Chittor, sacking the fortress. Akbar ordered a general massacre of the town's 30,000 civilians. Mughal's armies were generally instructed not to commit atrocities like this because the preferred strategy was to corrupt and absorb adversaries into the military imperial system. In this type of warfare, forts and cities were encouraged to submit without a fight. However, if they resisted, they would be horrific consequences for the resistors, as in this instance, the siege had lasted 126 days. What happened in the aftermath? Chittor was incorporated into the Mughal Empire. In light of Mughal's siege of Chittor, several other Rajput kingdoms submitted to Mughal rule, but the Rana of Mewar continued to resist, engaging in guerrilla warfare in the countryside. Finally, in 1615, Rana's successor submitted to the Mughals in exchange for remaining the local leader. The Battle of Rajmahal. Why Bengal? Bengal was one of the most populous and prosperous parts of South Asia. This wealth was based on agriculture and textile manufactures. Bengali South Asian textile products were coveted across Asia, Africa, and Europe. Bengal was a prized possession. The Sultanate of Bengal had a mixed population of Hindus and Muslims. What's the trigger for the conflict? The Sultan of Bengal, Jord Khan, seized Mughal frontier posts. What happened? Akbar began military operations against Bengal and suffered some setbacks. Then in 1574 embarked with a fleet of boats down the Ganges to reach Bengal. There he took command of the Mughal troops and seized the key elites of Hajipur and Patna. The Sultan of Bengal decided to retreat. What happened in the aftermath? This was an unprecedented military success for Akbar, as armies generally did not operate during the South Asian monsoon season. Over the next couple of years, the Mughals took over the administration of several parts of Bengal, eventually executing Jor Khan. Following a decisive victory at the Battle of Rajmahal in 1576, they then annexed Bengal and made it a province of the empire in 1576. It compiled from Ali 2021. These two examples have given you a snapshot of how Mughal military power worked in practice. A combination of strategy, tactics, judicious use of military technology, sophisticated logistical organisation, power politics. The decisions of the key leaders and brutality. There was what we call a snowball effect to Mughal military campaigns as they went on over the 16th and 17th centuries. Those who resisted them knew they could expect no mercy, whereas those that submitted to Mughal rule could become absorbed into the Mughal imperial system and retain or extend some of the existing benefits they had previously enjoyed as independent rulers. Military power allowed the empire to expand, and knowledge of how the Mughal armed forces operated dissuaded many, but not everyone, from opposing it. Challenges to the Mughal power. In this section, we'll look at two examples of how the Mughals used military power to maintain their rule over places and people. Mughal historian Michael Fisher states the emperors almost constantly faced rebellions and revolts by rival members of the dynasty, imperial administrators, army commanders, regional rulers, and popular movements. These rebellions never gained the momentum, scale, or organisation to fundamentally shake the edifice of Mughal power, but they were perennial feature of Mughal history, Mughal imperial power rarely operated without opposition. A feature also common to the Ottoman Empire, given their Central Asian lineage. Akbar and his predecessors had relied on Chagatai, Central Asian or Uzbek, notables in military campaigns and in the administration of newly won imperial territories, especially against the lowly Sultanate of Delhi. Akbar moved to curtail the power of what were known as Uzbek notables, reducing their autonomy and withholding. Yes. Their share of war booty for campaigns. Akbar was attentive to need to eliminate clan groups and factions inside his nobility and to ensure the nobility relationship was one of loyalty to him alone as emperor. This led to several rebellions amongst Uzbek notables. For example, in 1565, Akbar was informed that one such notable, Iskander Khan, planned to rebel. Khan and some allies occupied Lucknow in North India, intending to use it as a springboard to imprison Akbar and take it over the empire. Akbar defeated rebels but pardoned them, and Iskander even returned to the imperial fold as a governor of Lucknow. This was unsurprising, as accommodation and reconciliation with rebels was a key plank of Mughal imperial power and governance. As we saw earlier, some historians argue that a drop in temperature in the 17th century, a little ice age, although the dates for this are debated among historians, placed enormous stress on the functioning of both the Ottoman and Mughal empires. Environmental history has developed since the 2010s and helped us to understand how and why famines and rebellions occurred during the early modern period. As in the Ottoman case, historians have argued that climate change had a significant impact on the Mughal Empire. This was most notable in the increasing dire situation facing the peasants who made up most of the empire's subjects. As a result, peasants across the empire felt their only option was to rebel against their imperial rulers to resist the burden of agrarian taxation, which they found intolerable. Read secondary source 8.9 blog post of Safiye Morshed on the climate change rebellion in Mughal, India, and summarise the argument in a few bullet points. Then answer the following questions. To what extent do you think climate change spurred rebellions against Mughal rule? Do you think factors other than climate change might have sparked those rebellions? Do you see any parallel with reading you did earlier about the effect of climate change on the Ottoman Empire? As climate change and rebellion in Mughal, India, on page 253, as people and governments across the globe feel the pressure growing of climate change, PhD candidate Safiye Morshed shares her research into a period of historical changes in climate in India, their possible impact on governments' relations with its people. The Mughal Empire, 17th century India, struggled with famine, peasants' rebellion and war, as well as enduring a little ice age from 1600 to 1670. Do the abnormal weather patterns of the 17th century explain the relationship between these three circumstances? The historical chronology I established with my data set suggests they did. In establishing what I believe is the first quantified timeline of the 17th century Mughal Empire's famines and major peasants' rebellions, my novel data set speaks to whether overreach of the Mughal state contributed to famine and peasant rebellion, whether war caused the famine and wave of peasant rebellions, and whether the climate shock of the 17th century were responsible for catalysing it all. Mughals attributed famines to increased political instability for the 1650s, where the movement of troops could result in raids and crop destructions. But climate historians have noted abnormal weather patterns between 1600 to 1670, with especially poor weather around 1630. If peasant rebellions increased more in the 1630s and 1650s, then it is more plausible they did so because of climate. For my research, I developed data sets for peasant rebellions and famines using centralized contemporary state histories. I recorded the number, size, type, and date of conflicts which occurred from 1555 to 1680. As rebellions tended to be recorded in less detail, I estimated rebellion sizes by ranks. Used a series of proxies to understand the size of rebellions. One proxy, for instance, was the status of the officer sent to put down the rebellion. If a high-level government official was sent down a rebellion, it indicates the rebellion was more significant. If the emperor personally went to put down the rebellion, it would receive the highest rank of 5. Difference in ranking indicates an exponential difference. I also constructed famine data for the empire using Abbas Simp's records of famines from contemporary histories. With both, I can observe the extensive and intensive features of peasants' rebellions and how closely associated those measures are with climate change. We can see a substantial increase in the frequency of famines between 1630 and 1670. For practically half the years, there are famines recorded, compared to only 10 in the entire preceding 75-year period, 1655 to 1630. The number of provinces affected by these famines also seem to have increased. Around the same time, the intensity of peasant rebellions increased substantially, where there are even substantial rebellions above rank 3 between 1630 to 1680. Compared to only 2 between 1555 to 1630, famine and rebellion seem to go hand in hand. Keep in mind that the rank size of rebellions means they were exceptionally larger, where a rank of 4 rebellion of 5,000 people would have 5 times larger a rank of 3 rebellion of 1,000 people. And the rank of 5 rebellion of 20,000 people was 4 times larger than a 4 rank rebellion. Clearly, there was a substantial shift in the size of peasant rebellions around the same period where the state experienced more famines, which coincides with the Little Ice Age identified by climate historians. The timeline suggests that the inhospitable climate of the 17th century initiated the spate of peasant rebellions, which prevented revenue collection for the economy quite dependent on agrarian taxes. Moreover, for a state that was increasingly engaged in large conflicts with enormous armies, peasant fight made it difficult to feed soldiers during times of war. Famines also triggered peasant migrations, leading to structural changes in the economy. Peasants joined zamindars, which organised for local security and restricted paying taxes to the central government in the face of increasing scarcity and the limited capacity of the states to provide employment of famine relief. Large numbers of peasants joined zamindar militias for security. Bolstered by large peasants' armies, zamindars were able to better resist tax payment, further limiting the state's ability to collect taxes and work to protect peasants from plundering soldiers. It shows the percentage of rebellions motivated by taxation decayed, as was attributed by the chroniclers and in histories. Much of this data set refers to the zamindar rebels of the period. That the largest jump in the number of tax-motivated rebels comes in the 1630s, perhaps first indicates a response to those famines. Though the increase rate remains for the remainder of the century, the Mughal governors and commanders on the ground were not unaware or unresponsive to these changes. Recognizing the importance of peasantry, they relied on direct negotiation with the peasant population as a way of preventing migration away from the Mughal lands. Those findings are lessons from what modern governments may face as global climate continues to change over the last few decades. My research revised the history of peasant rebellions during the Mughal Empire, My data show the catalyzing event was as little ice age that began in 1630s. The famines triggered mass peasant movement and memberships in tax-resisting rebel groups, which prevented revenue collection for the economy, which relied heavily on agrarian taxes. These changes posed new structural changes to the state, unlike what it had ever seen before, restricting its fiscal capacity and potentially spurring a decentralisation of power to the Zamindars. It is difficult to assess the success of Mughal policy responses, though they clearly believed increasing peasant security was the best preventative measure. The discussion for his activities at the end of the unit. The exercise of the imperial power is always contested, particularly and in particular places and driven by specific circumstances. We can see the percentage of rebels were involved against tax or tribute or payment increased. Highest was 16 between 1660 and 1680. Suppose 1670, 45 rebelled. As the Ottoman Empire expanded, the imperial elites from the 14th century accepted differences of language, religious faith, and culture among its subjects. Berkeley's metaphor of a spoked wheel with an imperial centre hub negotiating with group spokes was a key strength of how empire functioned on an everyday basis. Berkeley argues that a major feature of Ottoman longevity was a pragmatic and flexible management of diversity within the empire. This seems persuasive and goes some way in explaining how the empire worked. However, Courtauld, a fellow Ottoman historian, criticised Berkeley for considering only a narrow range of Ottoman society, namely state and elite agents such as provincial notables. Berkeley's analysis could have been strengthened by looking at how politics of difference worked with a broader socio-economic section of Ottoman subjects. The source material for how women such as Voloksana influenced Ottoman imperial policy is very limited, as you probably realised from the expert from this journal. Nevertheless, from various Ottoman and non-Ottoman unofficial sources, especially observers of Ottoman imperial court, it is clear that Voloksana and others who succeeded her in the positions outlined in the article had an influential role in Ottoman imperial policies. While we probably shouldn't speculate as historians, it is likely that Sultan Solomon consulted Roxolana about the various military campaigns he planned and undertook. As we saw in Unit 4, the debate around the effectiveness of gunpowder technology forms only part of a remarkable story. A Markovist argues Mughal military power worked as a result of a combination of factors. Use of military technologies, to be sure, but also the sophisticated organisation of the Mughal military machine, along with the huge resources of manpower that the Mughals could draw upon in South Asia. The government notes this imperial inventory from the end of the 16th century gives the modern historian some insight into the lower echelons of the military labour market. The sheer quantity is staggering. Historians have generally accepted Mughal administrative records didn't over-exaggerate the numbers they record, taking a global comparative perspective with other empires in existence at the same time. These numbers are vast. The Mughals were clearly capable of raising huge armies in the field. For the specific campaigns with smaller numbers in table, for empires exercising power, they needed personnel to fulfill that function. This table shows that the Mughal Empire was clearly capable of raising and deploying armed forces to meet its imperial aims, climate change and rebellion. More shared database is compelling, especially when placed in a comparative imperial perspective with the Ottoman example you explored earlier this week with Sam White's Climate of Rebellion. Climate change clearly did contribute to historical change in a wide variety of areas, most notably the willingness of peasants to resist their rulers. Yet climate change is probably not the only explanation for why people resisted imperial rule in certain ways. I think we should add the impact of Mughal agrarian taxation policies, Mughal administration policies, and how imperial officials and their local allies, chiefly zamindars, carried these out on the ground. Robin Mackay,